So one of the trends that you're going to see if you've been reading all the articles that Jack Hirsch and I have been doing, Chris McCormick, we've been talking a lot about 7s and 9 woods, but the two most popular 7 woods on tour are TaylorMade and PING. And there's 2 reps out here that are responsible for all these 7 woods going into play. It's Kent Notes from PING and Adrian Riefeld from TaylorMade. So we're going to go on each truck, talk to these guys, find out the who, the what, the why of the lofted fairway woods, specifically the 7 and the 9 woods, because there's going to be a ton of them out here at Quail Hollow because this golf course is playing 9,590 million yards. It's going to be a wild week. Let's go find out what the hell's going on. AD.
Yo.
Ton of 9 woods, 7 woods, and it's not just now, it's been happening for a while. But this truck kind of started that trend, right? So tell me specifically, like, what is it about? What benefits are you guys getting out of these heads? Because I'm noticing it doesn't really necessarily adapt to like fast or slower players. It's kind of like fast players are putting them in play.
Yeah, they're kind of, so I would say for the majority, like a 9 wood can replace a 3 or a 4 iron.
Okay.
A 7 wood, a 3 iron, and maybe get a little more out of it.
Okay.
The simple result is obviously higher launch with more spin.
But getting further, since the ball speeds up, so they're hitting it further with more spin and more launch.
Exactly right.
Okay.
So if you're looking at someone who's trying to be more aggressive on a golf course, you know, where you're talking about off the fairway into par 5s, the greens are really firm out here. And I was out there yesterday with Scotty and Colin.
Right.
And they, you know, even with all the rain, you could see that the greens had like a bounce in them.
Right.
So really, that's like kind of rule number 1. Rule number 2 would be, you know, out of the rough.
Okay.
So you can, you know, out of the rough, out of a tough lie, I would say a 9 wood or a 7 would outperform a long iron
12 times
100% of the time. So if you can advance a 7 wood 100 yards further than you can advance a 3 iron out of the rough.
Right.
You know, that happens 2, 3, 4 times over the course of a tournament. You're in a better place.
The one thing that I've noticed, and I talked to Tommy a little bit about this, is there's like, and I use this term like raising the floor, and he said it's easier for him, like with a 9 wood, it's easier for him to get to, say, just for arbitrary number, like a 230 carry number. He's like, the thing is, with the miss, I don't lose that much on the miss. Yeah. So like my miss with a 9 wood is 224, my miss with a 4 iron would be 219 or whatever.
That was, you know, that was really what sold Colin.
Okay.
So he plays a CB 4 iron, or he plays a 774 iron. And it, you know, if the air is quite heavy and cold, you know, his miss hits, he can lose 10 to 12 yards on that easy. You know, if it's a 220 club and all of a sudden you're hitting a 4 iron and it goes 208, that's a huge difference. That's a club difference. Yeah, that's a big difference. And when he was hitting the 9 wood and he would miss one, or he would slightly miss it, and he's looking up and he's only lost 2 or 3 yards. Right. Like, that got him excited.
Well, you had a great quote in that article that we did about what you said to Colin in the middle of, like, you know, if you're in the middle of the 18th fairway at Torrey, right, and you're going to hit 10 shots in there with your 4 iron and 10 shots with a 9 wood. How many tournaments?
For sure, it's over the course of, like, your average is the proof will be in the performance of the club. But the reason I picked that shot is it's a par 5. Over water, the flag's right over the water.
Checks off every risk box you can think of.
You know, if you dropped 50 balls there and you hit 25 of them with your 4 iron and you hit 25 of them with your 9 wood, how many tournaments are you going to win?
So the 2 most prominent lofted fairways on tour are you, Kent Notes, and PING. And Mr. Rietveld over there in the TaylorMade truck.
Okay.
A lot in play.
Yep.
For PING specifically, what about this 7 wood is working so well, and why do you think as a fitter it works so well?
Yeah, I think part of the reason and the magic behind how we make this 7 wood so good is we take the high forgiveness and super easy to hit G line. If it was, you know, it's been doing forever, right?
It's always the max.
It's always the spinnier one, right? And we cut it down to 41 inches, which is an inch short of what a standard 7 wood would be bought at our stores. Yeah. And then we put in, like, this is for Austin Eckroat, 10x.
Okay, you go heavier on the shaft.
We usually do 8s and 9s, but Eckroat places is even shorter, actually. So we go 10. So we go heavy shaft, stiff shaft, short length.
Tip it 2.
Tip it 2, okay. And then we usually use the smaller big minus to get the loft down to, this says 21. This is probably around 19.5 is our honey hole in terms of launch and spin.
So so this is interesting. So like for example, like what Adrian does is a little bit different than what you do. Obviously, different heads or whatever. But what you guys are doing is you guys are basically mitigating over distance through shorter length.
Correct.
So you might go a little stronger in the loft, but you're going shorter in the length.
Yes.
And that flattens the ball flight down.
It does. And obviously we probably maybe have a little spinnier head than them. So,
you do, yeah.
So what we do is when we take the loft down, we get to take the loft down, cut the length, so it comes out. They still launch around 10, which is only about a degree more than their 3-wood,
right.
which kind of freaks them out.
But spins in the 4,000.
Yeah, 4,500 is kind of our target. We're looking for 10 launch, 42 to 4,500, and that tends to go, obviously everyone's different, but player to player tends to go that 245, 250 number that we're looking for.
For like Taylor, for example, it's 245, 255.
Yep, Echo maybe 240.
And then are you finding yourself putting a ton of weight in the back just to ensure that it's spinning enough?
Yeah, this weight's usually pretty heavy in general, so we just keep that there. Because of the shorter length and the timing of it, sometimes we do have to put a little bit of weight in the toe just to slow down the release, because it is pretty easy to square this up at this length and this loft.
And is it true, like, do you think, like, when some of these better players see loft, their tendency is to want it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
It wants it to go, they want to feel like it's going to go left, so if you can slow the toe down.
Yeah, we use that in our favor for our driver fittings all the time. Like, you get a guy that's weakening it a little bit right, just try to find him a head that's got a clip more loft. Visually, they'll just naturally start to turn it over a little bit easier. So.
All right, AD was walking up the truck. We were just sitting here, and he had one more thought. Tell us what you're thinking.
So, something that I thought about, which also resonates with players who play like a 5-wood, right?
Right.
And who are really good with a 5-wood. The players are so strong nowadays that the gap that they have to cover is basically from 0 yards to, like, if you think of Rory,
350.
Like 350.
Yeah.
So you only got 14 clubs to cover that gap.
Right.
So more and more these days, you need clubs that can do multiple jobs, right? And cover good, and that's why
you almost need like 3.5 iron, 4.5 iron, like something like I get it.
That has more options,
right?
More options to it, and that's what these high-lofted fairways do. We've designed the tech that they're able to be used by the strongest and the best players in the world now. And now we're learning about how they can be used, right? And then I'll give Rory's a perfect example of this, right? He hits his driver, say 350.
Right.
You know, he's got a 3-wood that
goes 300. You're right.
300, right? So now all of a sudden, he's got he could have 20, 30, 40 yards of yardage,
right,
to cover with precision. And that's why I would say Rory's the best 5-wood player I've ever worked with in my life, because you watch him add spin, take off spin, add shape, a lot of shape,
right?
And he hits these numbers so well, and that's why I think you're seeing this trend of fairway woods and high-lofted fairway woods going in play a lot, is because there's more and more of that going on.
Well, he covers, so like with that 5-wood, it's funny, like I was thinking about this because I put it in terms of loft. He covers 16 degrees to 21 degrees with that 5-wood, right? Which is 2 clubs.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. But you said something about Colin's 9-wood, and I put it in the article. But you said it's the closest thing to a pitching wedge from 225 that you'll ever see.
Yeah.
Which is a great quote. Yeah. Like that's
the dispersion's so tight. And like you think of somebody like again, let's say somebody only hits their drive at 250, which is not talking about out here.
Yeah, it's like Rocco Media.
250.
I had to, sorry, Rocco.
So like they have the option of almost having 2 clubs that go the same distance, but just at
one way up in the air and one flat.
Trajectories.
Right.
They have options in abundance, whereas the best players in the world and the longest players in the world need to cover so much ground. It's beautiful to see how the shot making with these high lofted fairway woods helps them to do that.
Well, the other thing that's also interesting is that, like, if you take the mini driver, 7-wood, 9-wood, like, so there's unique options. So like mini driver, for example, if you hand Rory McIlroy a club that he can get 175 ball speed at 3,600 RPM to spin, that's a weapon, right? If you give Tommy Fleetwood a club that he can hit 230 at 5,000 spin, that's a unique weapon, right? Yeah. And I don't think that's like, if you contextualize it with the numbers, that's where people will really understand, like, oh wow, that is something different.
Exactly. Except Rory hits the one that goes 350.
yeah. So this is what I love about AD though. He gets these thoughts and he just kind of strolling along. So we had to add this to the video because he's masterclass fitter. I'm very proud of this boy. Thanks, dude. Appreciate you. Go back to work.